Now, it was a fine and dandy Tuesday morning when Lil Tom Sawyer, scruffy-headed and barefoot as ever, came skipping down the muddy banks of the Mississippi River like he ain't never heard a lick of trouble in his whole life. The sun was shining, the river was slapping at the shore in a lazy sort of way, and Tom was grinning, ear to ear like he just stole a fresh apple pie off Widow Pritchard's windowsill. Tugged along behind him, holding a straw bonnet in one hand and swatting at horseflies with the other, was none other than Becky Thatcher, his bestest friend who ever lived in the whole wide cotton-picking world. Some folks called her his sweetie. Others said they were just kids who didn't know nothing about love. But them two? They proclaimed from the hilltops that they were love-struck like Romeo and Juliet, if Romeo had a slingshot and Juliet kept bees in a jar just for fun. "We're the happiest dang couple this side of the river," Becky sang, arms spread wide like she was flying. "Nothing but sunshine and gumdrops and all that other crap." Tom agreed, spitting watermelon seeds into the wind. They danced and skipped and whooped their way right out of their hometown of Simpleton, Missouri, a place so backwards even the cows walked in circles. They figured they'd have a little adventure, maybe fish for catfish, maybe find a cave or two to get lost in again. Becky insisted they pack extra matches this time, just in case. But what they found instead was something entirely off. Just a little ways downriver, past a crooked tree that looked like it was scratching its head in confusion, they stumbled on a place neither of them had ever heard of before. A crooked wooden sign stuck in the ground read in barely legible letters, "Welcome to Cannibal Misery, Pop, N.A." Tom squinted. N/A? What the dickens does that mean? Becky giggled. Probably means not available. Like they're so humble they don't even count heads. Tom scratched his noggin. Or maybe it means not alive. But Becky just laughed and pulled him forward. "Oh, stop being such a spoil sport, Tom. I'm sure this town will set us up for the night. Look, they even got houses and everything." The town was a sad, saggy-looking place. Every building looked like it'd been sneezed on by a sick giant. The paint peeled off the walls like scabs on a sunburnt mule. Windows stared blankly out with torn curtains blowing from the inside like ghostly fingers beckoning to come on in and sit a spell. And the smell! Lord have mercy, the smell. It had the strong and unmistakable aroma, that's Becky's fancy way of saying smell, of someone who had been dead for several months and had time to rot and stew in the summer sun. The wind carried it like a polite warning. "Y'all sure you want to hang around here?" Tom tugged Becky's sleeve. "Bex, I reckon maybe we should just turn back. This place gives me the shivers right down to my toenails." But Becky, always the curious one, waved him off. "Tom Sawyer, you are such a fraidy cat. We're going to be just fine. Look, that house has smoke coming from the chimney. Let's go ask if they'll let us stay the night." They walked up to a house that looked like it had once been painted white, maybe, during the Jackson administration. The porch boards creaked with every step like they was protesting the weight of livin' folks. They knocked, and sure enough, the door creaked open all by itself, as if the door was in on some kind of joke. Standing there was a tall, gray-faced woman in a long black dress that looked like it had been stitched from funeral curtains. Her hair was twisted up in a nest of pins, and her eyes were black. Not dark brown or shadowy, but black like burnt coal in a cold stove. "Why, hello, dearies," she said with a grin that was about 6 teeth too short of comfort. "Y'all lost?" Becky, ever the diplomat, smiled real sweet. "Oh no, ma'am. We're just wandering. We was wondering if we could stay the night, if it ain't too much trouble." The woman's grin widened just a smidge too much. "Why, of course, my sweet dumplings. You may stay, ahem, for the night, so long as you do me one teeny-tiny favor." Tom gulped. "What sort of favor?" "Oh, just a little harmless chore," she purred, stepping back into the gloom of her parlor. "You see, my fence out back's gotten awfully dull as dishwater. If y'all would be so kind as to paint it white as bone." Becky clapped her hands. "Paint a fence? Oh, Tom's a professional fence painter. Ain't that right, Tom?" Tom's mouth opened, then closed like a fish gasping for breath. "Yeah, real good at paintin'. Famous for it, even." The woman handed them a bucket filled with a thick, gloppy white paint that smelled off, like it had meat in it. Old meat. Real old meat. "You can start right away," she said, her voice floating back as she disappeared into the house. "The sooner you finish, the longer you can stay." "Well now," Tom and Becky stood in the back of that creaky old house, brushes in hand, buckets at their feet, and not a single ounce of common sense between them. The fence loomed high and long, like it was trying to keep something out. Or maybe keep something in. As the hot Mississippi sun began to sink just a touch in the sky, they slapped that strange-smelling paint onto the wood, humming and singing like they were in some sort of church choir. Except this wasn't no hymn. They was making it up as they went. We's painting a fence for a creepy old hag, and ain't nothing about this seeming a red flag. The paint smells like stew, and the town smells like doom. But long as we's together, we's over the moon. Tom chimed in with a clap and a stomp. The fence might be cursed, or filled with some bones, but I got sweet Becky and her cheerful tones. The air smells like meat left too long in the heat, but we's just two kids. Ain't that dandy and neat? They giggled like fools on a pie wagon, slapping globs of that suspicious white goop all over the crooked pickets, not caring one bit about the way it bubbled when the sun hit it or how it sort of hissed when you brushed too hard. Just then, from the alleyway, out shuffled a scrawny-looking boy, all skin and bones and eyes too big for his skull. He looked about their age, maybe a smidge younger, with his ribs poking through a ripped shirt and a jaw that looked like it was chewing on nothing but air. He sniffed the breeze, then looked at 'em like they was the ones smelling bad. "You too dumb or something?" he said, voice scratchy as dried corn husks. Becky just gave a bright laugh and twirled her brush like a baton. "Oh, heavens, no, sir. We's just so satisfied with each other's company that we sing when we work. Ain't nothing wrong with a little joy in the air, right?" The boy stared for a long second. Then he shrugged, muttered something about stupid tourists, and slinked off like a half-dead coyote. Tom watched him disappear around a corner and said, "Bex, that kid smelled like death." Becky rolled her eyes and flicked a dot of paint at him. "Oh, stop it, Tom. You always think everybody smells like death. You said the same thing about the pastor back in Simpleton." "Well," Tom muttered, "he did smell like mothballs and old sermons." They finally finished painting just as the sun hung low like a ripe peach, casting long shadows that didn't quite match where they should have been. Becky gave the fence a proud nod, like it was a masterpiece. Tom just wiped his hands on his overalls and tried to ignore how the paint wouldn't come off. "Well," Becky said cheerily, "I say we go explore this little old town square before supper." They skipped, less enthused this time, down the dusty road toward the heart of Cannibal misery. The buildings loomed tall and crooked, like the town was holding its breath. Shadows clung to corners. The air got thicker with every step, and the smell— merciful heavens, the smell! It was a stew of rot and burnt grease, like someone was cooking roadkill over a tire fire. Flies buzzed thick in the air, landing on windows, door frames, and worse, people. And yet, the townsfolk walked around with that same hollow look, like they didn't notice or didn't care. "Golly," Becky said with a scrunched-up nose. "It's like they were cooking up corpses here." A man walking past, pale as flour, dressed in a dusty apron, perked up and licked his lips. "Stop it," he grinned. "You're making me hungry, and I just had lunch." Tom froze mid-step. What in the jumpin' Jehoshaphat did he just say? Before Becky could answer, they heard a ruckus up ahead. A crowd was gathered around a makeshift barbecue pit in the center of the square. The smell was strongest here, thick, sweet, and choking like meat left out during a heat wave and then rolled in onions. Folk stood in a tight circle, mouths open, eyes wide, eagerly taking samples off a big blackened grill. On that grill sizzled, well, it was meat, technically. But Tom swore he saw a toe, maybe even a few fingers. The shapes weren't right. Some pieces looked like livers, others like they'd been carved off a thigh. "Free samples," called a toothless woman in a blood-stained bonnet. "Hot off the bone." Tom took one look and shook his head like a wet dog. "Nope, not today. Not never." But Becky, sweet foolish Becky, reached out and grabbed a little chunk of greasy mystery meat on a toothpick. "Becky, just one bite," she said with a smile. "What's the worst that could happen?" She popped it in her mouth. Tom watched her chew. At first, nothing. Then something. Her pupils got real big, so big they nearly swallowed her blue eyes whole. She blinked once, slow, then smiled. But it wasn't her usual Becky smile. It was off, wider. Too wide. Like it didn't belong on her face. "Y'all all right?" Tom asked, voice low. Becky tilted her head. I feel hungry, she whispered. Tom stepped back. Like, still hungry? Or like, hungry hungry? Becky didn't answer. She just stared at him, then turned her head real slow and looked back at the grill. Tom reached for her hand. Come on now. I think we best be getting back. Just then, off in the distance came the unmistakable sound of a dinner bell. Becky's head snapped up like a bloodhound hearing a duck call. The maid's ringing the bell, she said in a sing-songy voice. Time to eat. Tom and Becky, after a long day's work painting that accursed fence, trudged into the supper room, sweat-soaked and plum-tuckered out, and plopped their tired old behinds down at the dinner table without so much as a second thought. The supper table was long and warped, made of some wood Tom didn't rightly recognize, but it was damp to the touch and sticky like it remembered things. Laid out before them was a feast of the strangest kind. No chicken, no taters, no peas. Just piles of glistening red meat, heaped like someone raided the town morgue and thought it'd make a fine casserole. The old maid, Miss Crowley, sat down at the head of the table with a smile that could sour milk. Her lips curled like burnt parchment, and her teeth were a mess of yellow pegs and bloody gums. Y'all worked mighty hard, she croaked. Reckon you earned a hearty meal. From the side parlor came the thump, thump, thump of heavy boots, and in stepped the father of the house. He was built like a lumber pile and smelled like someone had poured gravy on a dead man and left him in the sun. Alongside him was a woman with a neck like a stork and a gaze that could turn vinegar to wine. She held a leash, and on the other end of that leash, well, a snarlin', scratchin', foam-dribblin' boy, about 14, crouched low to the ground like a wolf pup gone wrong. His teeth clicked together like scissors, and his eyes rolled with that same wild look you see in folk who ain't slept in weeks and been eating the wrong kind of meat. The leash pulled taut as he lunged across the room toward Tom and Becky, claws extended and mouth frothin'. I'll eat your teeth, he howled. The mother yanked the leash hard and gave him a sharp whack across the back with a brass rod. Down, Huckleberry, Tom blinked once. Did you say Huckleberry Finn? The father chuckled like a man discussing the weather. Oh, that's him all right. Huck's our boy. He's a wild one, always has been. Ever since we started introducing him to Long Pig, he's been hooked. You know how it is. Start too fast and they lose all control. Tom stared. Calm, thoughtful, poker-faced like he was in the middle of a game of checkers with the devil himself. Ah, right. Human meat addiction. Yeah, that old chestnut. The father nodded sagely, reaching across the table to carve a thick slab of something that might have once been part of a schoolteacher. Yup, you really gotta ease him into it, you know? Start with the calves, maybe a forearm or two. Never jump straight to brains or kidneys. That'll fry 'em. Lost 2 nephews that way. Just couldn't handle it. Across the table, Becky was digging in like she hadn't eaten since Christmas. Her face was smeared in grease, and she had a rib bone clenched between her teeth like a chew toy. Mmm, she sang. This is the best meal I ever had, Tom. Try some liver. It's juicy. Tom smiled the kind of smile a man makes right before jumping in front of a train. The mother, meanwhile, had finished beating the ever-lovin' sin out of Huckleberry with her rod. He whimpered on the floor like a whipped mutt, eyes still twitchin'. She reached under the table and brought up a platter with 2 pale little baby feet still in their booties. There we are, darlin', she cooed. Supper for you. He slurped 'em up like pickled pig's feet, crunching the toes one by one. She turned to Becky, hand dabbing her forehead with a rag. Lost 2 of my boys already. Kuru, you know, that brain sickness, comes from eating too much gray matter too fast. The key is discipline. Brains are hard to master, Becky agreed, voice muffled through a mouthful of tongue. That's what my aunt always said before she went missin'. Tom blinked slowly. Tom, Becky cooed, lovin' and blind as a bat in a cave. My sweetheart, darlin', why ain't you touched your tasty grub yet? Tom looked at the plate. It stared back. He swallowed. Oh boy, I just remembered. I need to use the old outhouse. All them greens I ate earlier. Get a fella right backed up. The family nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable. You'll come right back, won't ya? Becky asked, smilin' wide with gums flecked in blood. Wouldn't dream of leavin' ya. Tom lied so hard he nearly turned to stone. He stood, excused himself like a gentleman, walked out the back door, and once clear of the porch, sprinted like the hounds of hell were gnawing on his britches. He didn't stop at the outhouse, didn't even glance at it. No, sir. He ran straight through the town square, past the smoking meat pit, past the eyeless dog gnawing on a shin bone, past the schoolhouse where the bell rang without a soul inside, and up the iron ladder of the town water tower. Up and up, higher than he'd ever been, till the wind was whipping through his hair, and the town below looked like some cursed ant farm. Old Tom Sawyer, bless his weary soul, sat hunched atop it, arms wrapped tight round his knees, a boy lost in thought and trembling like a sinner in the pews come Judgment Day. The search party, if you could even call it that, had long since fizzled out, what with all the townsfolk giving up on finding him and going back to their midnight meat snacks. He could still hear the faint sounds of gnawing and slurping in the distance. Somewhere down yonder, maybe in a root cellar or a dusty crawl space, Becky was probably humming a tune and munching on a thigh like it was a turkey leg at the county fair. And that thought, well, that just made Tom's guts twist like a snake in a wheelbarrow. He sniffled and wiped his face with his sleeve. "Lord," he whispered into the void, "what in the ever-loving tarnation am I supposed to do now?" And that's when it happened. The sky cracked open. Not with thunder, not with rain, but with pure, blazing, holy light, pouring down from above like God had poked a hole in the heavens just to shine a lantern on one lonesome, scared little boy sitting atop a rusted-out water tower. Tom squinted up, eyes wide, pupils shrinking to pebbles. "What in the heck is that?" he gasped. And then came the voice, deep, commanding, yet gentle as a lullaby. It vibrated the bones in his ears and tickled the hairs on his neck. "Howdy do, Tom?" The voice said. "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Perez. Anywho, you get the gist." Tom's jaw went slack. He near about fainted, but caught himself on the rusty rail. "Oh, Lord," he murmured. "I dunno what I gotta do. I'm stuck in this nasty, smelly old town full of folk gnawing on each other like possums at a pig roast. And my dear sweet cakes, Becky's gone. She's done turned turncoat. She's eaten people, Lord. People." The voice paused for a moment, like it was scratching its holy beard. "Yeah," God said. "I've been thinking about that. You remember how I judged that evil old town of Sodom? You know, fire and brimstone, salt statues, the whole dramatic ordeal?" Tom nodded quick. "Sure as cows chew cud, I remember. You done destroyed the snot out of them folk." "Well," God said, "this here cannibal misery, it's due for the same treatment. More than due, really. Overdue like a bad library book." Tom gulped. But what about Becky?" he asked, voice shaking like a leaf in a cyclone. "She's my darlin', my true love, my buttered biscuit of the soul." "Sorry, Tom," God said. "She's done gone too far. She ain't Becky no more. She's what I like to call reprobate. You don't come back from eating baby feet with a smile on your face, son. She's past the point of return. I'm talking too far gone like a mule in a swamp." Tom lowered his head, tears prickling at the edges of his eyes. He felt like a balloon who had just been popped by a particularly rude porcupine. "So what happens now?" he asked. There was a pause. Then God's voice, soft but stern, filled the night once more. "Oh, I ain't destroying this town." Tom blinked. "You ain't?" "Nope. You is." There was a rustle below, and Tom peered over the edge of the tower. There, at the base of the ladder, lay a neat little bundle, a weather-beaten box with a handwritten label that read, "Strike anywhere, everywhere, and always." And next to it, a large iron canteen, glimmering under the light like it had been filled straight from the River Jordan itself, except it was full to the brim with everlasting gasoline. Tom felt the gears in his head turn, slowly at first, then faster, clicking and clacking, like a cotton gin with purpose. "Oh," he whispered, eyes wide. "I see. We's gonna burn the town." "Right you are, Tom," God said with a proud sort of chuckle. "Just remember to light the outhouse first. That'll buy you a real good explosion to start with. Then fan it out from there. Nice and steady, like butter and toast." Tom nodded, his chest puffing up just a bit. His fear began to melt away, replaced by something older, something righteous. Vengeance. Justice. Holy fire. He stood tall against the night air, hands tight on the ladder. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered. "Take care, Tom," God said. "And remember, aim for the butcher shop second. They're the ones what started it all." And just like that, the heavens shut, snuffing out the light like someone flipping a divine switch. The world fell back into its murky darkness. But now, Tom Sawyer had purpose. He climbed down that tower slow and steady, boots hitting the rungs with resolve. He picked up the canteen, sniffed the gasoline like it was apple cider, and struck one of them sacred matches. It lit bright and hot, and for the first time since Simpleton, Missouri, Tom smiled. A holy smile. A dangerous smile. A smile that said, "Let's burn this cursed town to the danged ground." Well now, hold on to your britches. 'Cause what happened next was something pulled straight from the Book of Revelation if it was rewritten by a moonshine-sippin' mad poet with a vengeance streak. That good old boy Tom Sawyer, barefoot and blistered from righteous thinkin', ran through the town of Cannibal misery like a wildfire with a switchblade. He poured gasoline like he was blessin' the land, on doorsteps, under porches, through broken windows of butcher shops and baby meat boutiques. Strike after strike, his matches hissed and snapped like vipers, catchin' flames quick as gossip in a church pew. The old rickety saloon lit up first, turn orange and red, its sign, Bert's Pickled Bits and Spirits, crumblin' to ash with a hiss. Smoke curled into the sky like the devil himself had started cookin' supper. Tom let out a high-pitched holler, half joy, half tears, then dashed into the old gunsmith shop, a sagging timber joint with busted glass and a stench of old grease and newer regrets. Inside, amid shelves of dusty ammo and barrels with cobwebs hanging like drapes, he found it, a polished, pearl-handled revolver sittin' like it'd been waitin' just for him. He took it in his hand like a preacher taking up the good book. "You and me, we got a sermon to deliver," he said, and spun the chamber like a carousel of doom. By now, the townsfolk, if you could call 'em folk, and not just meat-gnawing, eyeball-popping, toe-sucking monsters, had begun pouring out of their homes. Some was clutching dinner plates, others with napkins still tucked in their shirt collars. They saw the flames, saw the silhouette of Tom against the firelight like some holy banshee, and they panicked. "Sweet gravy, Martha," shouted one. "Save the spleens," hollered another. Tom fired into the air first, like the world's last fireworks show. Then he shot low. He picked off the old barber who'd been serving meat stew to kids in the schoolhouse. He plugged the baker lady right in the breadbasket. He even shot the milkman, who didn't even deliver milk, just a bucket of spinal fluid and a smile. And all the while, he sang. A strange, sad tune, soft as molasses but sharp as a coffin nail. Becky'd be singing right here by my side, brushing her hair with a femur she'd dried. I loved her too much, but the Lord said no more. So I'm setting this town down to hell through its floor. Homes collapsed behind him. The church steeple crashed down with a thunderous ha-rack, the bell ringing out one last deathly hymn. Those what tried to run found themselves met by angels, not the sweet harp-strumming kind, mind you, but the real deal, 6-winged, flame-eyed guardians of wrath. They sliced through the escapees with flaming swords, turning cannibals into cinders before they could even scream proper. And so it came to pass, in the blink of a smoky eye, that the whole one-horse town was turned into a no-horse graveyard. The buildings had melted to black piles of ash, the townsfolk were nothing but smoldering memories, and the only thing left alive in all of Cannibal misery was Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher. They stood in the middle of the square, surrounded by fire and ruin. The church, once bright white with fresh painted walls and human hide pews, was now a hollowed-out skeleton. Becky was twitching. A lot. Her eyes had gone wide and glossy, her smile stretching too big for her face like she'd swallowed too much of something she shouldn't have. She turned to Tom, dress covered in soot and dinner stains, and said in that honey-dripped voice that now gave him the shivers, "Oh, my beloved Tom Sawyer, why'd you go and murder this dear old town? They was treatin' us so kindly. Heck, we could have got hitched right there in that there chapel, raised a whole litter of sweet lil' cannibal babies together." She giggled, and twitched, and licked her lips. Tom's stomach turned. She was too far gone. Way too far. He said nothing for a moment, just pulled out a second revolver, one he'd grabbed from the sheriff's office before it burned to the ground, and handed it to her nice and gentle-like. "Here," he said, voice even. "Let's do this like Romeo and that girl what died with him. I'll shoot you, then you shoot me. We'll be together forever in the Lord's dear old kingdom." Becky's smile got even bigger, which was somehow worse than a frown. "Ah, Tom," she cooed, "that's the most romantic thing you ever said to me." They stood back to back, guns raised. Tom closed his eyes, counted. 1. Becky took a breath. 2. Becky licked her lips. 3. Tom spun around fast as a jackrabbit on fire and shot her square in the head. Her smile froze. Her body crumpled. Her soul, whatever was left, went flying off into the air like a paper doll in a storm. Tom lowered his gun, sighed deep, and said, "Psych!" He looked round at the burnt-out ruins of what once was Cannibal Misery. The heat still licked at the air. The smoke curled up to heaven like incense from a funeral parlor. Tom wiped the soot from his face. He looked toward the Mississippi, just a glimmer of silver in the far-off dawn. "I'm leaving this state," he muttered. "Gonna hitch a ride on a barge, maybe head east. Find me a quiet place, a normal place. Maybe become a poet or something. Grow a beard, I dunno. But I sure as sin ain't staying in Missouri." And so, with nothing but his 2 revolvers, a broken heart, and the everlasting smell of charred bone in his nose, Tom Sawyer left the town of Cannibal Misery behind him, never to return again. He was never the same after that. But then again, who would be?